Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. My name is Natalia Moczulska and this is the news. Today marks 3 months since the beginning of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Each war day brings new information about war crimes. In the Mykolaiv Oblast in southern Ukraine, the Russians directed the civilian evacuation column to the mined area, and the survivors were shot. In Mariupol, over 200 bodies in an advanced state of decomposition were found in the basement on one of the collapsed buildings. The Russian army concentrated its offensive in the eastern Donbass. 4 people died as a result of the gunfire in Severodonetsk. The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, once again thanked for the supply of weapons and ammunition and informed about the current situation in the country. Debris collection in Desna in Chernihiv Oblast has been completed. 87 people died there after 4 Russian missiles fell on the city. In less than 3 months, Russian planes and helicopters carried out more than 30,000 attacks. Bakhmut, Popasna, Severodonetsk. So far, the occupiers have concentrated the greatest activity in these areas. They made a bloodbath there and are trying to destroy everything. Everything that is alive. Literally. The aggressors are constantly shooting at the route from Bakhmut to Lysychansk, which is used by the Ukrainian army to supply troops and evacuate civilians. Meanwhile, the Russian occupation forces introduced a new system of passes in Mariupol. The Mariupol region is patrolled by Chechen militants, the so-called Kadyrovtsi. My only son. They just aimed it at him and shot him. They aimed at private apartment blocks. They were shooting right at the garage as he descended into the basement. They destroyed the wall between the garage and the apartment. The mayor of the city, Petro Andrushchenko, informed about the shocking discovery in Mariupol. In the basement of one of the collapsed blocks in Mariupol in the southeast of Ukraine, more than 200 bodies in an advanced state of decay were found during the dismantling of the rubble. However, exactly 3 months after the beginning of the Russian aggression in Ukraine, the process of launching the Kharkiv subway began. We have been in the subway since March 3rd. Before that, we ran away to friends and found shelter in the basement. Then we came here because it's the safest place. The most important thing for us was that it should be quiet here. There were so many people here, but my son and I found a place in one of the carriages where we were staying until yesterday. We were ordered to leave the subway because the mayor decided that it would be operational again. Everyone is very scared because the shelling is still going on. The missile attacks have not been cancelled. Taking into account the current state of our subway system, the first trains can be launched within the next dozen or so days. A special commission inspected the rolling stock, equipment system, and infrastructure that came under fire. Heavy enemy fire is currently underway in Liman, in the Donetsk region. According to the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, from February 24th, the Russians lost, among others, over 29,000 soldiers, 93 anti-aircraft systems, and 170 helicopters. Currently, the Russians occupy nearly 1/5 of Ukraine's territory. Some of these areas are cultivated. In turn, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Dmytro Kuleba, called on world leaders to prevent Russia from exporting stolen grain. The World Economic Forum began on Sunday in Davos, Switzerland. The talks concern the most important global problems, including the war in Ukraine, the COVID-19 pandemic, climate change, and economic crises. Poland is represented by President Andrzej Duda, Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki, and Deputy Prime Minister Jacek Sasin. Yesterday, Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki opened the Polish House, where a series of discussion panels will be held. It is not the markets that decide the power of states, but the sovereign states that shape the circumstances so that the markets can function normally. And what can I say? Poland warned against these risks that are materializing today. Poland was preparing for this, which is why Polski Dom, Polish House, here in Davos at the World Economic Forum, is already a very strong voice, flowing from here to various centers.
Polski Dom, tutaj w Davos, tu w centrum, na Światowym Forum Ekonomicznym.
President Andrzej Duda takes part in the forum. He met, among others, the president of Armenia and Prime Minister of Montenegro. He also took part in a panel of presidents of the 3 Seas Initiative and a discussion on geopolitical changes in Europe caused by the Russian invasion.
Point of view, my opinions.
The Ukrainian elite realize that if they agree to Russia's territorial demands, they may in principle lose power. None of the Ukrainians expressed the opinion that they should surrender to the Russians. Andrzej Duda criticized the statement by former Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi, who believed that Ukrainians should be persuaded to accept Putin's demands. He added that Poland is fully on the side of Kiev. Russia has broken all the rules of international law, and it cannot end up with impunity. It cannot do without consequences. There cannot be a situation where Russia will not pay reparations for the damage it has done. It is obvious to me. There must be a penalty for starting this unprovoked war. The Economic Forum in Davos is also an opportunity for the interests of global business to develop its investments in Poland. According to preliminary government estimates, Poland recorded a budget surplus of around 9 billion zloty last month. The preliminary analysis shows that this is not an effect of inflation, but of the good condition of enterprises. This is surprising. It surprises even the greatest optimists. From the lips of Polish leaders, there is an unambiguous voice. Sanctions imposed on Russia must be tough and tight. Only then will it be possible to stop the criminal Russian war machine. These sanctions should mean a complete blockade and no trade with Russia. This year's World Economic Forum in Davos will gather 59 heads of state and over 1,250 global business leaders. The summit will last until May 26th. One of the most important topics of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, is the future of Ukraine. From the beginning of the invasion, efforts have been made on the international scene to counter the effects of the economic crises through Putin's aggression. In turn, in Tokyo, a summit meeting of Australia, the US, India, and Japan. The main topic of the talks was the threat of Chinese domination in Asia. During the Economic Forum in Davos, the managing director of the International Monetary Fund, Kristalina Georgieva, said that regardless of the war in Ukraine, she does not expect a recession in the world's largest economies, but she cannot exclude it either.
So my answer is going to be not at this point. It doesn't mean it is out of question. We have downgraded our projections for growth for this year in April for 143 countries. This is 86% of global GDP. And since then, in a short period of time, a little bit like the weather here in Davos, the horizon has darkened.
There are many headwinds to the global economy. The war could escalate. You could have sanctions and counter-sanctions. We have central bankers around the world tightening monetary policy. Financial conditions could tighten much more rapidly than we've already seen. And growth in China is slowing. So all of these pose downside risks to our forecast. So again, globally, I would say at 3.6%, there is a buffer. At the same time, there are countries that are getting hit hard, countries in Europe that are getting hit hard by the war, where we could certainly see technical recessions.
In turn, the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, on behalf of the community, declared the continuation of aid to Ukraine.
Ukraine must win this war. And Putin's aggression must be a strategic failure. So we will do everything we can to help Ukrainians prevail and retake the future into their hands. For the first time in history, the European Union is providing military aid to a country under attack. We are mobilizing our full economic power. Our sanctions and the self-sanctionings of companies themselves are draining Russia's economy and thus draining the Kremlin's war machine.
NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg noted that close cooperation between the North Atlantic Alliance and the European Union is of key importance for the response to the war in Ukraine. That is why it is so important to expand NATO's borders.
We welcome the fact that Finland and Sweden have applied for NATO membership. I'm confident that we will be able to address the concerns that have been expressed, and that we will be able then to welcome Finland and Sweden as members of our alliance.
The Pentagon informed about further aid for Ukraine. Countries such as Poland, Italy, Denmark, Greece, and Norway announced new aid packages in the field of security.
Russia's unprovoked and cruel invasion has galvanized countries from around the world. And the bravery, the skill, and the grit of the Ukrainian people have inspired people everywhere. Now, we've made important progress since the contact group was established after the Ramstein summit last month. And today, together with Minister Reznikov and his team,
In turn, in Tokyo, there was a meeting of the Quad Group, also known as the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue. The informal alliance of the United States, Japan, India, and Australia has great potential to act in maintaining security and stability in Asia. Joe Biden used this opportunity to draw attention to the urgent issue of the war in Ukraine.
At the same time, we're navigating a dark hour in our shared history. The Russian brutal and unprovoked war against Ukraine has triggered a humanitarian catastrophe, and innocent civilians have killed in the streets, and millions of refugees are internally displaced as well as exiled. And this is more than just a European issue. It's a global issue.
According to UN experts, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which is one of the world's most important grain exporters, will aggravate the pre-war food crisis.
For Ukraine, I was already out there with a clarion call that we've got a world food crisis, and we're facing the worst humanitarian crisis since World War II. Just when you think it couldn't get any worse over a year ago, you had Ethiopia, then you had Afghanistan, and then the breadbasket of the world. This now got the longest bread lines of the world. And so now, because of this crisis, we're taking food from the hungry to give to the starving. It's absolutely a crisis mode. What do you think is going to happen when you take a nation that normally grows enough food to feed 400 million people and you sideline that? What do you think is going to happen? And so you add the fuel costs, food costs, shipping costs. It's devastating to not just our operations, but to global food security.
The war in Ukraine has an impact on the climate crisis, which has been at the top of the list of the most important and urgent challenges faced by Western countries for years. In the face of war and the tragedy of millions of people, this issue had to take a back seat. Finally, an era of the history of New York City has ended. The last public payphone in the city has been removed. Due to the increase in the number of mobile phones and the use of new technologies, the booths no longer fulfill their basic functions. The removal by crane of the final payphone, which was located on 7th Avenue, marked the end of an era for the street's iconic feature. According to local media, Manhattan will keep 4 of the old-fashioned phone booths on Upper West Side and on West End Avenue. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Please stay tuned for Poland Daily Weather, Poland Daily Business, and some of our other programs. But from me, it's have a great evening.